3, 2, 1. We have a new NBA champion. So it took the New York Knickerbockers 1,858 games to win a championship.
New York, May 8th, 1970. It was at Madison Square Garden that the New York Knicks finally reached basketball's holy grail. After 24 long years since their founding, the team from the Big Apple could at last add a trophy to their cabinet. Until the early 1970s, the Knicks were never synonymous with victory. The New York franchise was one of the first to join the league in 1946. Yet despite a modest number of teams in the NBA back then, the Knicks struggled to stand out. In the early 1950s, they lost 3 consecutive finals. The following decade was even more dismal, missing the playoffs 7 straight seasons. An unusual feat in a league with such limited competition. While their Boston neighbors popped champagne championship after championship, New Yorkers had little to celebrate until 1970. With stars like Willis Reed, Dave DeBusschere, and Walt Frazier, the Knicks finally assembled a powerhouse. In 1973, the team climbed to the top again, humiliating the Lakers. With 2 championships now under their belt, the anomaly seemed corrected. The New York Knicks, representing the largest market in the country, would finally assert themselves as NBA heavyweights. And yet, after their 1973 title, the Knicks became inconsistent, alternating between lackluster seasons and quick playoff exits. Once again, the team faded into NBA obscurity, mirroring the struggles of their city.
People once called New York Fun City. Now the police and firemen's unions in New York are calling it Fear City.
By the mid-1970s, New York, a once great symbol of prosperity, was in total decline. The city was financially bankrupt, plagued by rampant crime, and rocked by social unrest. Central Park became a haven for drug addicts. Times Square turned into a center of prostitution, and neighborhoods like Harlem and the Bronx resembled war zones. For the first time in its history, New York repelled rather than attract people. Between 1970 and 1980, America's largest city lost nearly 1 million residents.
Good evening. This is the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange, the nerve center of American capitalism.
$350 Swiss.
Zurich, 23, Citibank.
If one word defines New York, it is resilience. The 1980s marked the rise of Wall Street and its golden boys. Manhattan began to thrive again with ambitious projects, and immigrants worldwide once more dreamed of glimpsing the Statue of Liberty. On 5th Avenue, the city's renewed energy echoed in the offices of the NBA. When David Stern was elected commissioner in 1984, he inherited a league on the rise. The dark days of the 1970s were behind, and stars like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird had made the NBA a hot topic. Stern's strategy was simple, yet brilliant. Focus on promoting players instead of teams. But to do this, players needed to be on the right teams. Unlike European competitions, America's major sports leagues are private businesses aimed at profit. To engage fans, nothing works better than equal chances for all teams. US leagues use a system unknown in Europe, the draft. The NFL first adopted this practice in 1935. After 15 years of competition, the same teams kept dominating. In the early 1930s, a bidding war for collegiate star Stan Koska highlighted the need for reform. To prevent such chaos, the NFL introduced the first official draft in 1936. The draft allowed the weakest teams of the previous season to take turns picking top collegiate players, ensuring weaker teams had a chance to become more competitive. This concept was a success and was later adopted by the NHL, MLB, and NBA. In the early days of the NBA, teams would pick players one by one until there were no prospects left, sometimes stretching to over 20 rounds. By 1974, this was reduced to 10 rounds. But who got to pick first? From 1956 to 1965, the territorial pick rule allowed teams to prioritize selecting local talent. This was scrapped in 1965 and replaced by a coin toss. When David Stern took charge in 1984, the league was still recovering from the chaotic 1970s. Stern's marketing plan relied on showcasing players, so why not transform the draft, then a low-key affair, into a televised spectacle?
Today, live from the Felt Forum in New York City, the USA Network presents the 1984 NBA College Draft.
We paid the USA Network to produce the draft. That's how difficult it was to get an audience for it.
You know, David Stern comes in and it's quite, it's quite a challenge actually to get this thing going. And then, God gifted him the 1984 draft.
The 1984 NBA draft, featuring stars like Hakeem Olajuwon, Michael Jordan, and Charles Barkley, is considered one of the greatest in history. Yet at the time, it generated little excitement. Many players, including Michael Jordan, didn't even attend the ceremony. Stern wanted the NBA to deliver an exciting spectacle both on and off the court. The 1985 draft lottery became a pivotal moment in NBA history. First, the number of rounds was cut to 2, a system still in place today. More importantly, instead of a simple coin toss to determine the first pick, Stern introduced an element of drama. By the early 1980s, tanking, deliberately losing games to secure the top pick, had become increasingly common. The Clippers owner, Donald Sterling, famously said in 1982, "To win, we must lose." In 1983, the Houston Rockets employed tanking tactics, including playing their nearly 40-year-old center Elvin Hayes for an entire game to ensure they didn't win. Their strategy worked. Houston won the coin toss and selected Ralph Sampson. A year later, they repeated the feat, drafting Hakeem Olajuwon. Pat Williams, then the Sixers GM, publicly complained, "The league's owners are furious with teams losing on purpose to secure the top pick." Stern decided it was time for a change. In 1985, NBA team owners approved a new system, the draft lottery. Having the worst record no longer guaranteed a top 2 pick. Instead, the order would be determined by randomly drawing envelopes, with Stern himself revealing the results. According to this system, the 7 teams that did not participate in the playoffs each had a 14.3% chance of obtaining the first choice. Among the bad teams invited to 1985 lottery, we find the Pacers, the Clippers, the Sonics. Yes, but especially the New York Knicks, represented by its legend, Dave DeBusschere. The victorious seasons of the early 70s seemed like a distant memory for the Big Apple's team. In 1985, the Knicks were coming off their worst season in 20 years. Amid injuries and disastrous performances, Madison Square Garden was often half empty, a rare occurrence for a city so passionate about sports. Like every other franchise, the Knicks had their eyes on one player, Patrick Ewing.
Not able to get it. Ewing is there, and Ewing sends it in. Patrick blocked by Ewing. Our shooting free throw. Double team baseline gets it off for Ewing. Absolutely awesome.
They feel so, good. We worked so hard to get here. We finally won it. We just feel, feels great.
In 1985, the entire basketball world had only one name on its lips, Patrick Ewing. Since Lou Alcindor in 1969, the NCAA had never seen such a dominant center. Standing 7 feet tall and weighing 240 pounds, Ewing was the total package. He could score, defend, rebound, and block shots. The Jamaican center's impact extended far beyond the court. His talent skyrocketed ticket sales for Georgetown University. Ewing was even received by President Ronald Reagan, and Sports Illustrated went so far as to call him the most recognized athlete in collegiate sports history.
The National Basketball Association, in its 33rd season, is troubled by diminishing crowds and declining television ratings, signs that fan interest may be waning.
Anybody who cares has a theory about what's wrong. Tickets cost too much, the season's too long. Now the sticky theory, that there are too many blacks.
I think there's a conflict between the white and the black, and I don't enjoy going to basketball and seeing all black players.
Not a good week for the National Basketball Association, which had to face allegations that cocaine use is common among its players.
In popular imagination, the 1980s were a wildly successful era for the NBA. In reality, the decade began in chaos. Before the rise of the Celtics-Lakers rivalry and Michael Jordan, the league faced significant challenges. TV ratings were poor, racial tensions were still evident, and the league struggled with drug problems. According to the Los Angeles Times, 75% of NBA players were addicted to cocaine in 1982. The situation was so dire that the league came close to eliminating 6 of its 23 teams.
You know, we keep hearing about the glory days of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, but even back then, with them, the NBA Finals were being shown on delay. They were shown on tape. They weren't shown live on broadcast.
Although things improved in the mid-80s, David Stern, the league's commissioner, couldn't afford to wait. To him and other observers, the fact that the New York Knicks, the team of the country's biggest market, were so bad was a commercial travesty. A few weeks before the 1985 draft lottery, the New York Times wrote, "There is a strong feeling among league officials and advertising executives that the NBA will benefit greatly if Ewing ends up in a Knicks uniform." Stan Kasten, then GM of the Atlanta Hawks, recalled, "I was sitting with some NBA guys, and I remember one high-ranking official, whom I won't name, being absolutely convinced about what was going to happen. He's going to the Knicks, he's going to the Knicks. It's all set up." In addition to introducing the lottery system, Stern decided to broadcast the event live on television. That might seem trivial now, but back then, even all playoff games weren't televised. Unlike the cold, rigid NBA commissioners before him, David Stern had a more ingenious personality. Growing up in his father's kosher delicatessen in New York, Stern quickly mastered the art of communication. After earning a law degree from Columbia University, Stern became the perfect mix of charisma and intelligence. For the NBA's first draft lottery, the league went all out. The luxurious Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan was chosen as the venue. But how would the order of the teams be randomly selected? The league ruled out ping pong balls, fearing they might fly out of the drum. Instead, they opted for envelopes, making it easy to display a franchise's logo on a piece of paper. Everyone present at the ceremony recalled the palpable tension. For this nationally broadcast first event, there was no room for error. It was May 13th, 1985. The fateful moment, 2 p.m., approached, and the room was plunged into an eerie silence.
Thank you. The drum will now be turned to further mix the envelopes, and then I will conduct the drawing.
The ceremony began, and Stern opened the envelopes one by one. Kings, Hawks, Sonics, Clippers, the names fell, and only 2 remained, Indiana and New York.
Boy, I started sweating. I says, you know, my God, we got a chance.
I was like, let it be New York.
The second pick in the 1985 NBA draft goes to the Indiana Pacers.
The horseshoe works. Basketball is back in New York City, my friends.
Have the first pick in the 1985 NBA college draft.
Oh, I tell you, when you got down to the last 3, I couldn't look. I couldn't listen to the commissioner. I was very nervous. It's just a wonderful thing having the #1 pick, and obviously I think everybody knows who our #1 pick is going to be, and we're very delighted.
I think you knew too. Show what you got in your hand. He has number 33 all printed up here already. Patrick, there's confidence for you.
The Knicks did not win a lot this year, but they won today when it counted because this came out of here. And that means that the franchise, 7-foot Patrick Ewing, is coming to New York.
Sensational! Ewing was heading to New York. The Knicks had been blessed with luck. Or had they? It didn't take long for some observers to dissect the lottery. Jack Wagner, the man responsible for placing the envelopes, worked for Ernst & Winnie, a supposedly neutral firm. When he placed the fourth envelope, the Knicks, he hit the edge of the drum, creating a visible crease. As the drum turned, David Stern kept a close eye on the envelopes. Was he ensuring he didn't lose track of the Knicks envelope? When Stern reached in to draw the envelope, his typically stoic demeanor faltered, and he audibly sighed with stress. As he plunged his hand into the envelopes, the creased Knicks envelope was clearly visible. Others speculated it had been refrigerated to make it identifiable by touch. But the conspiracy theory didn't end there. Ernst & Winnie, the firm overseeing the lottery, was also a close partner of Gulf and Western, which happened to own the New York Knicks. Before the lottery, Jack Crump, then president of Madison Square Garden, jokingly said, "If we don't draft Ewing, we'll call Ernst & Winnie and fire them." A few weeks later, no surprises. The New York Knicks drafted Patrick Ewing.
Well, Patrick, how does it feel?
Feels great. I'm very happy that New York has chosen me in the draft. I'm happy to play in New York. New York is a fine city.
Patrick Ewing is the biggest difference in the New York Knicks.
I think he's a marvelous player.
I think he's going to change the game around for him. He's going to be a force in the NBA. I'm looking forward to a good season.
He's going to take us to a championship in New York.
And who has generated the kind of publicity that Patrick Ewing has, he's going to probably draw very well at home and on the road.
After a dozen years of frustration capped by the worst season in 30 years, deliverance for the Knicks in a number 33 uniform.
And the press in New York has been known to put a lot of pressure on players who perform in the professional ranks. How do you feel you're going to be able to handle that pressure that's put on your shoulders?
What pressure?
Well, that's a good answer. I like that.
Ewing's selection sparked a frenzy in New York. Within 2 hours, 1,000 season tickets were sold. For the NBA, this first lottery was a ratings success and added even more excitement to the league. Criticism of the lottery's legitimacy soon followed. David Stern, ever sarcastic, responded, "If people want to say the lottery was rigged, let them. At least they're talking about us. It's incredible." Patrick Ewing, named Rookie of the Year, became the face of a New York team often in the spotlight during the 90s. Although he never won a title with the Knicks, Ewing became the greatest player in franchise history. Since his unceremonious trade to the Sonics in 2000, New York never reached the finals again. Some say ill-gotten gains never prosper. Like all conspiracy theories, the 1985 draft's rigging is most likely false. Regardless, the event remains etched in the mysterious and storied history of the NBA. Opening the door to conspiracy theories makes other drafts seem questionable too. In 1992, the Orlando Magic, a franchise David Stern adored, landed the cash machine Shaquille O'Neal. In 1997, the financially troubled Spurs drafted the great Tim Duncan. In 2003, the Cavs, on the brink of collapse, selected hometown hero LeBron James, much like Chicago did with Derrick Rose in 2011. But there are counterexamples. Highly anticipated Zion Williamson could have landed with the struggling Knicks. Instead, the far less glamorous New Orleans Pelicans won the coveted prize. Rigged? Not rigged? The truth will never be known. One thing is certain, Patrick Ewing's draft to the Knicks was a big win for the NBA.